Oh
All right,
no!
I'm gonna hit go live. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. Okay. Hopefully this is working. Hi, Anna.
Hi, Mike.
This is very weird because usually we don't let people see us podcasting,
No,
right?
it's very discombobulating.
Yeah,
We know that people are watching us, and
yeah.
we were just looking at the people who are waiting. I'm like, oh no,
Oh my
an
god! No,
audience.
there's
No.
people here. There's people here. Yeah. So yeah, thank you to everyone who's joining in the conversation with us tonight. This is very exciting. So, oh my god, Anna, we've got so much to talk about with
So
this
much. But
Successionistas.
first of all, I just want to ask everyone, it's not a rhetorical question. Tell us in the chat, are you okay?
Oh,
Are you okay after last night's events?
oh my god. Oh my god. I know. I need to know if people are
Because I'm
okay.
not.
We've already got, here we go. Tim Spence has already commented to say, I would love to delve into the symbolism of the hand holding moment in the limo at the end. Oh, we're going to get
We'll
to
get
all
to
of
it,
that.
Tim.
Don't
We're
you
gonna
worry
get
about
to
that.
it.
Don't you worry about
Yeah.
that. Evie said
Yeah,
she's not okay. Yeah, absolutely not
I
okay.
know.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you so much everyone for tuning in. It's the first time we've done this, so it will potentially be mildly chaotic, but only mildly. And I have put on makeup for the event, so you're welcome.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Yeah, and you're looking amazing, especially considering, Anna, you were up till what, 5 in the morning last night?
4
But we'll get to
a.m.,
that,
dude.
right? Yeah,
We'll get to that.
exactly.
Yeah,
We'll
I
get to that.
am. It's very sleepy. I am extremely dazed and dizzied by the events of last night. But oh my God, was it an event? But yeah, everyone, thank you for tuning in. And you can comment along and let us know any questions, comments, things you want us to talk about as we go through the episode and record the Successionistas as we usually would.
And what I will say as well, hopefully nothing will go wrong. But if anything technical goes wrong and either me or Anna disconnects or the feed drops, please don't go anywhere. We'll try and refresh the feed and get it back up and running as soon as we can. So if we leave, we will definitely try and come back. So just keep an eye if you can. Okay, so Anna, should we do this? We're going to do this formally as we start all our episodes, right? Here we go. Let's do it. Oh, let me make sure I'm hitting record on my audio as well.
Oh, okay. God, yeah.
Yeah.
Hold on, let me do that too.
This is the peek behind the curtain here of how chaotic it is.
Let's go.
Okay, you good to go? Here we go. Hello and welcome to the Successionistas.
The Successionistas!
That was good. A weekly podcast recapping and discussing the award-winning HBO TV show Succession. I'm Mike Munzer, a producer, podcaster, and a Succession obsessive in mourning.
And I'm Anna Bogutska, a writer, podcaster, Succession superfan, and #1 fan of Siobhan Roy. And on this podcast, we've been taking you through the highs and lows of the Roy family saga every single week as we've been recapping every episode of Succession's 4th and final season, which has been airing on HBO in the US and Sky and Now TV in the UK.
And this week, we'll be diving into season 4, episode 10, aka the season finale, aka the series finale, with Open Eyes. Anna, this is exciting because for people listening to this on a podcast feed, we're also currently live streaming, right? So we've got people watching us, and I love it because since we did our little intro, people have been shouting the Successionistas in all caps at us in the comments. So this is nice.
I love it. I think the main reason why we wanted to do a live stream version of this final episode is so that people could see that I do actually put my life at risk every single time we record to yell the Successionistas, the bane of my downstairs neighbor, but also fuck him. This is worth it.
There are a lot of times as well when I've genuinely thought Anna was just going to go flying backwards, like she would just disappear off screen at some point. Anna, we've got so much to cover, right? But I feel like I want to start by just asking you a bit about what it was like for you watching this finale, because you went to the BFI and watched it with an audience, right?
Yes. So let me paint you a picture in case anybody does not live in London or wasn't aware that this was happening. The BFI put on a live event a live stream of the finale of Succession. So starting at 2 a.m., which is the time that it was airing in the US, and it sold out in 3 minutes. It was the biggest screen at the BFI South Bank in London, which is 450 seats. And, the only thing that people needed to know was that it was streaming Succession live on the big screen. There was also extra activity, like, Jesse Armstrong was there. All the writers, well, most of the writers, the ones based in the UK, were attending. It was hosted by the other Succession podcast from the
What?
UK. I know. It's disgusting. It's disgusting.
Unbelievable.
I
Our
almost
invite got
yelled
lost
out.
in the post, clearly,
I
right?
almost yelled out justice for the Successionistas, but then I thought I do not need to be that person and somebody else should do that.
Imagine after all that waiting as well, if you were then kicked out, Anna, just before the episode aired.
But I've burned the whole fucking building down. Like, Mike, don't test me. Seriously,
Yes.
no. It was actually very fortuitous because I'd seen the first 2 episodes of the third season when they screened at the LFF a few years ago. And obviously, I could not get tickets for this. I wasn't a member. They sold out so quickly, and I am endlessly and eternally grateful for a listener of this podcast who reached out and couldn't go anymore and sold me their tickets, so I was able to attend, mainly thanks to this
That's
show.
amazing. That's amazing. Well, and because I went to the South Bank earlier that day, it was nice and sunny, and I walked through the BFI. And I noticed this was at about 12 o'clock midday, and there was already people sitting queuing in the standby queue for the Succession finale. And that was 12 hours early. People were already ready and queuing. So yeah, it was clearly, this means a lot to a lot of people, doesn't it?
There was something really discombobulating about heading towards an event at like 11 p.m. at night. And I downed an espresso before leaving the house. I got an espresso martini while I was there. And I also had a water bottle full of pre-workout, which is basically pure caffeine plus a little bit of extra stuff in there. And I was like, I need to be awake because frankly, I cannot stay awake past 11 p.m. It's like,
no,
literally.
I would also be panicking about my bladder as well during the episode with that many drinks, Anna. Did that not worry you that you might have to duck out in a crucial moment?
Well, I am a very stoic individual, and I have a very stoic bladder. So I did massively need to pee throughout the entire episode, but I was like, there's no fucking way I'm getting up. It's just not happening. It's not an option. So since it's not an option, forget about it. There's no way I would have missed a second of the episode and I was in the middle of a row, disrupted like 10 different people, be like, oh, sorry, I miscalculated my espressos.
Yeah.
No, it's not happening.
Yeah.
No. And it was frankly amazing. It was obviously full to the brim, like 400 people there. And it was a vibe. Like people were there. They were excited. They were reacting to everything. They were laughing, they were gasping, they were yelling at the screen. I definitely yelled "fuck you, Greg" several times in key moments, and so did kind of other people around me. And it felt, it genuinely felt, not to get to Ernest too early, but it felt genuinely very special that the writers and Jesse were there to listen and experience people watching their show.
Yeah.
Because I imagine, usually we watch TV individually, right? We watch it at home, we watch it alone, maybe with our partners or our families and stuff, but it's a home affair. So there is something really exhilarating about watching it with an audience, especially something like Succession that's managed to just really penetrate pop culture in such an incredible way. And it was a buzz. There was several standing ovations. It was a whole thing. I'm so glad I got to go.
Oh my God, this is so exciting. I love it. And did they do any kind of, I guess it was so late, right? But I was going to say, did Jesse Armstrong do any kind of Q&A type thing after the episode as well?
So he didn't do anything after the episode. There was a prolonged kind of pre-show before the actual screening. So at about midnight, the hosts of Firecrotch and Normcore, who were the hosts of the evening, kind of took to the stage. And first they did a little game with the audience, and then they had Jesse Armstrong on stage to do a sort of a fun type of Q&A. Then they invited most of the writers, everyone who was in the audience, so there was like 10 people on stage at one point, to talk about their work on the show. And that was kind of really phenomenally awkward in a great way because first of all, it is very difficult to handle like 10, 12 people on stage. They obviously couldn't say anything about the episode we were all about to see. It was like a very fun way to bide our time before we needed to begin with the screening itself. And also because like writers are not necessarily the on stage people, so they were all a bit like, talking about their lunches and their day. And Jesse Armstrong is very into soup for lunch, so that was a fact I did not expect to learn about him. But yeah, good for him.
Mike in the comments said, were there ad breaks during this, or was it like watching it on?
No
okay,
ads.
okay.
It was no ads. It was like watching a film, and obviously, watching in the NFT one screen, huge, beautiful screen, with amazing sound. Yeah, it was like a completely ad free.
Oh, wow, this is incredible. Well, I had a very different experience to that very glamorous, exciting evening. Actually, we got this comment here from Tommy C, who said, did anyone else watch it as soon as you woke up? I watched it in bed with multiple cups of tea. That is basically what I did. So I woke up at about 7:30 this morning. I did not even look at my phone. I went downstairs, went to the kitchen, made a cup of tea, fed the rabbits, and then went immediately to my living room, sat with a cup of tea under a blanket and watched it, because I was like, I can't go through my day or through the morning, not having seen it, and knowing that social media is going to be absolutely buzzing with it. So I literally had to wake up and make it be the first thing I did of today. So
yeah, you would have been
ruined. Quite a strange experience. I was also a little bit sleepy, but coming at it from the other direction, and just sat there for like 2 hours, just like, oh my God, first thing in the morning.
The internet was feral after the screening. I mean, I was online as soon as the episode ended, and it was like spoiler central. So if you hadn't seen it, you simply could not go online at all, because everyone was posting things. They were posting about Tom, they were posting about Shiv, about Mattson, about Kendall, everything. So you just had to avoid the internet altogether.
Unbelievable.
That was the only way for it.
Evie in the comments said 5 a.m. for me. That was when she watched it. Holy crap. That is dedication.
That's when I went to sleep, Evie.
Oh,
yeah. It's like, it's been, I don't know what the curse of this is. The last two episodes we've recorded, so episode 9 when I was in Cannes, and this one today, I've been so extremely sleep deprived that I've been like, this is not optimal time for me. I need to go to sleep.
No, I know. Please tell me you've got a slightly quieter week this week, Anna.
I have no idea what day it is. I believe it is Tuesday. I am told there's some sort of bank holiday thing happening. I don't know if that's next Monday or this Monday. That's where I am emotionally.
Wow.
That's where I am time-wise.
Okay.
So I'll do my very best. I'm just living in Succession world right now, so I don't think I can answer any questions that are not Succession related.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I need to get this out of my system, mate. But before we get into it, though.
Yeah.
Tell me, we had very different experiences watching it. Solitary versus communal. But what was your overall takeaway from it? Kind of what did you feel like watching it?
I felt everything. I think this is what was brilliant about this piece of television, which we will talk about. But it really was like a film, right? It was about 90 minutes. And there are moments of this. I feel like for me, I loved it. I think it is up there for me in one of the great television finales, because it felt exactly like everything I want from a Succession episode, right? It gave me, we flew off to glamorous locations. We had brilliant comedy. We had this kind of real joyous moment in the middle with the siblings actually getting on. Then, of course, you get all of the tragedy and the fights and, amazing moments with Tom and Greg and, moments with Caroline and everyone felt like they got a little moment to shine in this as well. And as well as being this kind of monumental episode that rounded off this story, it also just felt like just another episode of Succession too, really, right? Like it wasn't doing anything so crazy. Like you get some TV shows that are like, oh, we're going to jump forward to 20 years in the future or anything like that. Like it wasn't doing anything out of the ordinary. It was just another really brilliant episode of Succession for me. So I loved it. And I didn't, even though and we'll talk about this as we go, I'm sure, it doesn't necessarily wrap up every plot thread that was, dangling throughout these 4 seasons, but it didn't matter. It still felt to me like this was the perfect ending to the story of these 3 siblings. So yeah, I mean, like, you'd laugh, cry, everything, right? What an episode of television.
I think you're very right in that it felt like the perfect ending, mainly because this is the end of this story. The story is the story of the succession of Logan Roy, right?
Yeah.
And it is decided, and that is all.
Yeah.
And we get like only a few throwaway scenes with each of the siblings after the papers are signed and Waster is no longer the Roy family business. And that is all. And I've been reading kind of articles and think pieces and reviews of the finale and Succession as a whole and different characters most of the day. And there's been some grumblings about, oh, should they have gone on for more? Do we need more about what happens to the characters afterwards? Do we need more closure with some of the characters, more information about how this deal will change their lives? I'm like, no, because that
No.
is another story. The story of Succession is the succession, and it has happened, it is signed off, it is finalized, we're done.
Exactly. Like, it felt exactly the ending that, and it really feels like this show felt like an uncompromised Jesse Armstrong vision. Like, it kind of feels like this is exactly how he wanted to end this story he was telling, So I was so grateful for that. So we should say, obviously, hopefully, if you're listening to this and watching along, we're going to say we are going to spoil the finale, right? And
Please.
Usually I would start with like a little brief plot synopsis. And in some ways it's fairly simple, right? This is basically the day of and the day before the board meeting where the board will finally decide, will they sell Waystar Royco to Matsson or will they not? And obviously the first act of this episode kind of is Ken versus Shiv, right? Ken obviously doesn't want to sell, wants to ruin the deal so that he can remain king of the castle, CEO of Waystar. Shiv wants it to go through because she thinks if Matsson buys them, he's going to make her CEO. So you got these two opposite ends rounding up people and trying to get votes on different sides. Roman is kind of caught in the middle and in a very bad place. Then kind of it all goes to shit midway through where Shiv finds out, oh, she's not going to be made CEO if Lucas buys them. He's actually been fucking her over this whole time. She switches her allegiances, as she loves to do, joins Kendall. We get this blissful middle act where for a moment, for one night, these 3 siblings are having the time of their lives. They're getting on well. They give Kendall their blessing to make him, the king. And they all actually seem quite happy about it, right? And then, of course, the next day, the board meeting happens. Shiv changes her mind again in a shock twist, and I can't wait to discuss that moment. Shiv decides she doesn't want this deal she doesn't want Kendall to ruin the deal, and she doesn't want him to be the boss. And it creates this almighty row, this fight, or basically a physical fight in the middle of the office between these 3 siblings. Lucas buys Waystar, they lose, they go off to lead their sad lives outside of Waystar Royco, right? And Tom Womscams is made CEO. And that is kind of how it ends, right? It's pretty amazing. And we made predictions, Anna, the other day.
We did.
And I would say we got a few things right, but we also probably got quite a lot wrong, didn't we?
Yeah, which is inevitable. Same as when we did the Scream podcast, we got some things very right and some things very wrong.
I don't think either of us thought Tom Womscams was going to be CEO, right?
We really got seduced by the Greg as CEO idea. Although there was someone on TikTok that went viral just before the finale aired about Tom ending up with the top job because the clue being in his names, because it was a reference to an obscure baseball player from the 1930s or something,
who like wiped out 3 oppositions, like a triple wipeout or something they call it. I can't remember what it was. It's something American. But yeah, I heard about that as well, which is amazing. I love that prediction. That's brilliant.
And really it made complete sense. I mean, on the one hand, I'm personally very happy that Greg got bitch slapped in this episode and did not get the CEO job, and probably will get demoted and will be Tom's slave for the rest of his life.
Yeah, and he's probably going to have his salary significantly dropped from 200. He was on 200K as an assistant, Anna.
I've been an assistant. No. Not even not even a single digit of,
Yes,
of that
exactly.
salary wasn't my assistant salary or any assistant salaries. I Oh my God, the way I scoffed very audibly when that number was thrown out, I was like,
Yeah.
that is the most disgusting thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, unbelievable, unbelievable. So yeah, like this was an unexpected kind of fun little twist, really. Not even a twist, but it was just something that we hadn't considered, that Tom would end up this kind of slimy guy that kind of, as we've said over and over again, week after week, he kind of keeps on surviving like a cockroach, right, Tom?
Yeah, and
And
we should have predicted that because it's
yeah,
been obvious and it's been in plain sight the entire series. And I've read that Jesse Armstrong kind of always had it pretty early on that Tom would end up prevailing over them.
yeah,
And when we can talk more about actually the details of why and how he
yeah.
was picked over, other characters. And we didn't actually see anyone else be interviewed, but even it's again him versus Shiv. And
Yes.
that's been a conversation that they've had between each other about kind of him using Shiv to propel him into bigger and more important roles at Waystar, elevating his position with Logan. And even, when she gets offered the big gig in season 2, he's like, oh, but I thought we were working on this for me, not for
Mm,
you.
hmm.
We should have seen this, but this is Tom's superpower. He just makes himself less noticeable, and then he gets away with murder.
Yeah. Yeah. And then he sneakily rises to the top with Greg at his side as well. So we've got these two outsiders. They've been the two outsiders from the start, right? The two non-Roys
Hmm.
that are really part of this core cast.
Well, Greg is technically a Roy.
Oh, that's true. I suppose he is
He's a
technically.
cousin.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But these two outsiders from the main family have ended up being the ones that have stuck around in
Mm.
Waystar,
Mm.
basically. So it's interesting. Where do we begin,
Who?
Anna?
So I've been wondering this. Should we start with Kendall, mainly because
Mm,
we bookend the episode with him. We start with him. He's on an all-time high. He's like, I'm gonna be the new CEO. I've got everything
mm,
in my power. He needs to find Roman. Roman's MIA after the events of the last episode.
yeah.
But he just struts into the office. He's like, no, we have the votes. Everybody, including Tally. Tally Jelly Belly's back. Good for
Hmm.
him. He's getting that sweet, sweet commish.
So
Uh,
good.
he's back to just tell him, actually, no, you don't have the votes. You're not gonna get it. This is a futile exercise. But Kendall has a really particular way of absorbing the world where he refuses to see or hear anything that does not feed into his own vision of himself and
Yeah.
what he wants to be, not what he is. So he's like, no, we got it. We got it. We got it. You don't got it. Um,
Hmm.
and what I found, really, I mean, again, an impeccable performance from Kendall, but
Oh,
this is the episode where I think out of the entire series, Kendall's primal wound is exposed in a big bad way.
mm,
And he both becomes his father and categorically shows that he will never be his father.
yeah.
And that, especially towards in the third act, in that last scene where they're having that horrible physical fight in the boardroom, and he's screaming and he's fighting and he's physically assaulting Roman as well, and tries to hit Shiv too.
Mm,
He screams this thing, right, which I think is this is a skeleton key for the character of Kendall Roy, in my opinion. He says, he promised this to me when I was 7.
yeah.
He took me to his side and he told me this would be mine.
Hmm.
And Kendall has never let that go.
Yeah.
He is latched onto this probably like a quite generous and a hopeful promise. Logan probably thought that he was bringing up a new mini Logan. He gave him Kendall's middle name is Logan. He's Kendall Logan
Mm,
Roy. He thought he was molding his kid, his second eldest son, to be in the image of himself. And instead he gets this, like, you know, not the shark that he wanted to. Kendall is a weak man who
mm,
refuses to accept that he's weak. And he might not be by others' estimations, but he definitely is by his father's. So this promise that Logan has broken over and over again and that nobody gives a shit about except Kendall is so exposed in this episode, and Shiv laughs at him.
yeah.
And that
Yeah.
is devastating.
Yeah.
And then he gets cut down in that one scene several times. There is nothing else he wants or needs in life. He is a cog built to fit only one machine, and if he does not get this job, he might die. He really, that comes from like a core
Yeah.
part of his soul. And especially when Roman throws off the whole thing of you're not the bloodline, your children are not your children, you don't have children.
Yeah.
There is a ferocity that comes across his face, which is just like, you're taking away everything about me. You
Yeah.
can't, you're absolutely decimating him as a human being. And it's really scary to watch. It's like that scene in particular, you see Kendall really shed any semblance of humanity. Like he is a monster, but in a very different way from his dad. He
Yeah.
doesn't have that vim. He doesn't have that ferocity. That ferocity is dark, but it's not industrious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what an incredible episode for Kendall. And, it really did feel like, as much as it kind of brought all three of these siblings' arcs to an end, it really kind of felt like it solidified this idea that this story has kind of almost been about Kendall from beginning to end, right? We kind of begin and end on Kendall in this episode. And you're right. I think that little insight into he promised me this when I was 7 years old means that basically his head has been like, he has made that his entire personality, his whole life. He has been, all he's ever known that he's wanted since he was 7 years old was to become his dad. He doesn't understand how to live in this world not doing that. And he does, I think there's interesting things that he does in this episode where he kind of has this perspective too, where he talks about the job is awful and it'll destroy you and it'll kill you, when he's trying to dissuade Roman from taking it, right? And he sort of knows that it's bad for him, but he can't not do it. It's like like you said, that amazing quote about I only fit one machine. I am a cog that fits one machine, and he can't see anything beyond that. So you get these incredible highs and lows in this episode where it's in the first act, Kendall as that corporate fuckboy being like, I've got to round up the board and let's talk to Stewie, and, doing all of that stuff with his sunglasses on and his suit. Then you get to Kendall on kind of cloud nine in the middle section when he finally gets his happy Ken, which we never see. He shows his teeth and everything and smiles, right? when he gets his siblings' blessing to become the next CEO. And then that complete destruction of everything that is Ken in that final act when it is almost like, I mean, obviously Kendall is a character that is an addict, and he talks about it like an addict, I think, particularly in that last act when he goes from extremely angry and violent to then just kind of whimpering and just saying, please, 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 please let me have it. He's and stuff, begging. And he is absolutely like, and I think I'm probably not the only person that thought, is he going to kill himself at the end of this episode as well? He, that scene when he walks out defeated, literally knowing that that's it for him. He will now never achieve that because they no longer own Waystar. The only reason he was ever going to become a successful CEO or a CEO
was because of his birthright.
Exactly. And now he has no birthright. And it's like he looked like a man with nothing left to live for by the end of that episode. Basically.
And he doesn't. And, considering, everything we just said, we don't really get any more closure about his kids or Rava, but everything that the season has been telling us those are also deeply fractured relationships. So he has become the worst of his dad and with none of the powerful or the best qualities of Logan Roy. Yeah. So, and the other thing that is really brought back in that final argument is this idea of the no real person involved. Yeah. And that is a direct callback to when Logan tells that to Kendall several times over, which makes Ken see in that moment, oh, my dad is a monster. Like, he is complicit in all these crimes and all the corruption that has been going on in Cruises and at Waystar. He has covered up my terrible fatal mistake because it doesn't matter to him. It's not that waiter was not a real person. All the people who suffered in Cruises were not real people. And here Ken does the same thing. It's like, well, that murder didn't happen. I didn't kill anyone. I just made it. It's like, it wasn't real. It didn't happen.
God, yeah,
so
that
he's
moment
doing
crazy.
the same thing. But obviously, Roman and Shiv aren't going to react in the way that he reacted. And it
Yeah.
really, he is the biggest disappointment in a way,
Hmm.
because he is the worst elements of Logan and
Yeah.
none of the enterprising ones.
Yeah. And ultimately that massive fall from grace wasn't due to board members or Matson. It was Shiv betraying him, right? As
Mm,
well. It was his own
wow.
sister that caused this to happen,
Betrayal.
right? Well, I
We'll
know.
talk about that. We'll talk about that.
Exactly.
We've
We
got
will talk
thoughts.
about that. But yeah, again, her saying to him, I don't think you'd be very good at it. She
Yes.
says, I love you, but I cannot stomach you, right? And like it
Hmm.
is, the truth bombs coming out in that conversation between them all as well.
Which is kind of our relationship with Kendall as well. Like, if
Yeah.
we look at it kind of outside of all the memes and the
Hmm.
performance and the Jeremy Strong of it all, it's like he is a fucking horrible person. I can't stomach Kendall
Yeah.
as a person, but god damn it, do I love watching him, So
Incredible.
it's the same thing. And kind of going back to his final devastation, there's a few people in the comments who are saying that they thought that when he was taking the lift he might be going up to the viewing platform again, and I
Yeah.
was thinking the exact same thing. I was terrified at the signing because
Hmm.
I genuinely thought, oh, we're about to see Kendall's like body fall down
Yeah.
behind them. Like, this is it for him. There's nothing else.
Yeah.
He's got all the billions that he might ever need or want, but he has no purpose. His only purpose was to become the CEO of this one company, and that is never going to happen. And
Hmm.
it really reminded me, well, there's a lot of traces of The Godfather and The Godfather Part 2. There's a lot of
Definitely.
that in this episode in particular, more than any other moment in Succession. There's a lot of Fredo in both Roman and Kendall.
Yeah.
The whole thing of, like, I'm the eldest son. I deserve
Yeah.
more respect. I'm
The
smart.
entitled brother. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Kendall is not smart. But there's also this, like, there's this thing of I don't know if you've ever read, one of my favorite novels ever is Revolutionary Road, and one of the most
Mm.
devastating elements of that book is two people who realize very slowly that they are not ever going to have the talent to actually achieve the dreams that they had for themselves. And in their
Mm.
case, they wanted to be writers, or at least the kind of the male character wanted to be a writer. And this slow, excruciating realization that he will never be that, no matter how much he
Mm-hmm.
wants it, no matter how much he thinks that he deserves it, because he is simply not good enough.
Mm.
And Kendall realizing at the end of this episode that he's simply not ever going to have that, and that
Mm.
he's never been good enough for it, is horrific to watch.
Yes,
It is genuinely, like, it's not heartbreaking, but it's a different kind of devastation.
it is. I completely agree with you. And again, it just kind of emphasizes how good this show is at making us care about these awful people. Because you're right. We can't, none of us can stomach Kendall. He's awful, right?
Hmm.
But he is this like incredibly tragic figure with this really fucked up upbringing, right? As well, and again, that kind of that idea of none of them being able to escape that trauma, that cycle of abuse that their father put them in, basically, as well.
Mm.
It's so interesting. And that moment of happiness between them all in the middle here, what an amazing sequence that was, right? When they all go to Caroline's place, and
Yeah.
are they in the Bahamas or somewhere like
I
that,
think they're
right?
in the Bahamas. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just like what a joy that was, right? To get to watch them just like play off each other when they're in the kitchen and they're doing the meal fit for a king, and Roman with the cheese and everything. Like, it was so good, that stuff, wasn't it? So much fun.
Well, the fact that that scene in the middle, which by the way is like the longest chunk of
Mm,
the episode, we spend
hmm.
so much time with them just hanging out and
Yeah,
making jokes and having a nice time together and bonding. That the simplicity and the placidness of that makes the stuff that follows so much more devastating,
yeah,
because it was so good just to blink ago, that the
yeah.
ending is horrifying, doubly so because we've just seen them be so calm in each other's
Oh,
presence.
And you
And
know it's coming, right? Because you're like, oh, I'm only halfway into the runtime of this, and they've already all decided that they're going to make friends and make
yeah,
him the CEO. Therefore, it's not going to end happily, right? It's
nope,
like, yeah,
nope. Any time that they, they're actually, coming to an agreement between each other, it's going to end really badly.
yeah.
And yes, someone, NASA pointed out that it's Barbados, not the Bahamas.
Ah,
Thank
okay,
you.
yes, Barbados. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. But I love that. I love that we got to do a bit of jet setting to some cool locations in this episode as well. Like it wasn't entirely in that
Yes.
boardroom, it was nice. Again, you kind of felt like you got the best of so much of Succession in this
Yeah,
episode.
and we got
And
to see them all in shorts, in
uh
casual wear, which they
yeah,
don't really do.
I was worried about
Yeah.
sharks at one point, Anna. I was worried that I was like, is Kendall going to get eaten by a shark after Roman brings up the whole shark thing before they go
Oh, I think
swimming? I
that
was
would have
like, oh
been
no.
too goofy.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
I think there's two things about Kendall that we can talk about without bringing in Roman.
Mm.
That I
Oh
genuinely
my
thought, and
God.
I've rewatched the episode this afternoon after watching it last night, and it's one of the most confounding scenes for me, and I really wonder what you made of it. The scene before they go into the board meeting where Roman is, looking himself in the mirror, looking at his wounds on his head, and
Yeah.
he's like, "Oh, I don't look so bad. It could have been me. Why isn't it me? It could have been me, right? It should have been me. Maybe it could have been me." And he's kind of spiraling. He's just glimpsed Jerry. He's like, "Oh, I don't want to see anyone. I don't want anyone to see me." And Kendall does this thing where he hugs him. He gives him a bear hug, and he forcibly keeps his head, forces it into his shoulder, deliberately kind of opening up his wound over his eyebrow again and making him bleed.
Mm.
And I really want to know what you think, because I'm not sure still what that scene means.
No, I really I found that scene incredibly disturbing for so many
Mm,
reasons. And I think partly because I couldn't quite understand entirely what was going on here. It was almost like to me that his Roman gets very upset. He sees Jerry and he gets suddenly very upset. And he's looking at himself, like you said, and he's sort of saying, oh, it doesn't look that bad, the scar. But he
mm,
almost sounds more worried about the fact that it doesn't look bad. Like it's
yes.
almost like I don't know. It's almost like an ego thing, maybe, that if he's going to go into that boardroom and kind of concede that he's no longer the boss, he wants it to look like he's been through more than he actually has. Like it's almost like I almost was reading it as like I don't look beaten up enough to walk into that
Mm-hmm.
room and show my face because I'm going to look weak. And so
Mm-hmm.
this thing that Ken does in response, this horrific violent hug where he is like rupturing his stitches, was like absolutely awful. But at the same time, I was like, did Roman kind of want that too? Because obviously, as we know, Roman has this kind of masochistic streak. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't think necessarily Roman was enjoying it in the moment, but also I wonder if he did sort of want Kendall to do something like that. Because as much as Ken is also a monster, we've never really seen him until this episode be violent towards his siblings. In fact, he used to always jump into their defense,
Yes.
right? When Logan was violent. And that felt, even at that point, out of character for Kendall. But then it almost felt like, is this something that they kind of do? Is this something that Kendall does to Roman because sometimes he thinks Roman needs it? It's like the thing about locking him in the dog cage and making him eat dog food, and he was like, "You wanted it." Like, I don't know. I'm interested to hear what people
So
in the
there's
comments think of this as well, because I'm sure there's like a million different ways to read that scene, but it was very troubling.
there's a couple of interesting readings in the comments. So Louisa
Mm.
says Roman was physically hurt by his father before and has shown several times he sort of associates being hurt with love from dad, which is a
Yes.
very good point, because also Roman is the only one who we actually have canonically been told by different characters that he was physically hit by his
Mm.
dad.
Hmm.
And there's a moment where he gets hit so hard, he gets slapped so hard, one of his teeth falls out, and
Yeah.
Kendall, as you rightly say, has always jumped to his defense automatically. So the
Mm.
fact that he's now physically hurting Roman is another one of these things where he has become his dad, but the worst the worst variant of Logan.
Yeah.
And then Nassif says a different perspective, which is he did that to destroy Roman's confidence. If the cut looked bad enough, Roman wasn't going to be able to try to be him. And I
Hmm.
think I also thought that because I'm like, is he trying to belittle him and dominate him by physically hurting him and kind of diminishing his self-confidence because he would instantly remind him of that physical abuse that he would expect or receive from Logan? And at the same time, is he trying to make sure that Roman doesn't pipe up and goes against Kendall in the immediate, so like in the board meeting? He doesn't really want to hurt him, but he wants to keep him in his place just
Yes.
for the duration of the vote.
Yes, I think that's what it is, right? And probably all of these things can be true, I imagine, right? I think there's probably a little bit of all of that coming into it. It's quite different to the next time when Kendall's violent towards Roman, when Roman has wound him up to the point where he snaps, right? Because he talks about your children aren't your children, the bloodline and all that stuff, and makes all those vile, very horrible Roman comments, right? And that seemed much more like Kendall was then actually just snapping violently at him, whereas that hug was something different, wasn't it? But it was very, very scary, threatening thing. This kind of like deadly hug, like you're mine now, kind of a
Well,
thing.
it was a bear hug. And actually, someone who only goes by etc. said that it's a direct parallel to when Logan kisses Kendall after Kendall confesses to killing the waiter in series 1. He did the same kiss on the forehead, which is true. He
And it's
does the
like you're
bear
mine
hug
now, kind of thing.
Yeah, you're under my control in a way. Like, you'll do whatever I need you to do. And I do think like Roman is a masochist, and it's never been kind of, it's been always dealt with kind of really comedically, but I think it's also leaning into that. But that's not, not to get into this side of things at all, but that's not kind of consensual masochism.
No.
That's like him hurting him as a way to control him and to destabilize him. I find, but
that was abuse, right? That was just abuse. Yeah,
I found it so chilling. And also, jumping ahead to the other physical altercation they have, where Roman is parroting the things that he's probably heard Logan say, that Kendall's kids are not his own, which we had never, it was implied because his kids are not white. But it was never, he directly says one of them is a buy-in, which means like one of the kids is adopted and the other one is, I guess, conceived via in vitro, so with a sperm donor. So he's like, and he tells Ken point blank, you have no children. So he's not continuing the bloodline, even though they have their name. And obviously, it's his kids and he loves them. And Kendall throws also, he's like, he tells him something like, you shut your mouth, you fucking cuck. So they're throwing this like terrible insults at each other's kind of masculinity in that scene. They're really going for like, you're not man enough for our dead dad. Like, their kind of daddy issues are really coming out and throwing and kind of canceling each other out. And the way that Ken grabs Roman's face and just wants to smother him it's genuinely chilling.
It is these kind of physical fights, and then it kind of devolves into them sort of falling on the floor and rolling around, and suddenly they seem a little bit more pathetic again, don't they? Like, suddenly it reminded me more of Tom and Greg's fight in the bathroom. There were a lot of like physical altercations in this episode, weren't there? And a lot of impressions. Did you notice? I think somebody mentioned this in the comment, but there were a lot of moments of people doing impressions of each other in this episode as well, which I loved. A lot of like British accents and them doing Kendall at one point, and it was great.
The best one was Connor doing the little teapot dance, but in the vein of Logan Roy. That was probably the best impression. And genuinely, I think that's probably, I mean, I have no way to confirm this, but my gut instinct is that it comes from probably just the actors imitating each other on set and the writers bringing that into this final episode, because it's sort of a little bit of levity in a really hard series and really hard episode.
Yeah, completely agree. And I think you really got that feeling by this last episode that they all know each other so well, this cast, right? Like, they really have like lived these characters for like 5 years. And I think, like you say, those little impressions kind of really kind of I don't know, they really emphasized that kind of that journey that we've all been on with them, I think, I loved it. I
Mm.
loved it. Kendall did a great Caroline impression. I thought that was
Oh
brilliant.
yes, yes. And Roman did a great Peter impression with the special cheeses where he was like licking the
So good.
cheese. It was
So
beautiful. It
good.
was beautiful to behold.
So should we
And
talk about Roman? Because other than that
yeah.
moment he has with Kendall, like Roman is such a loose cannon in this episode in some ways, isn't he? And we said last week in our predictions, because we kind of had a vague idea of where we thought Shiv and Kendall would go in this episode. But
Mm.
Roman is such a wild card, isn't he? Well, we both were like, we have no idea what kind of a place Roman will be in this episode. But what did you think of kind of where we find Roman at the beginning of this episode and where it goes?
Well, we kind of find him completely bereft. You know, the fact that Roman would go back to one of his mom's houses
Hmm.
in Barbados to be taken care of, even though she's not a war mother at all. She's not a nurturing parent. So it's like you're going to someone who you know cannot give you the protection and the nurture you need, but this is literally the only thing you have left. You know, he's sort of regressed. He needs to go and be with a parent. He's
Yeah.
taken himself out of the corporate rat race for a moment. And he's really fragile. You know, he winces at that word and hates it, but he very clearly is. And
Mm,
he is a lot more temperamental even than usual. You know, someone in the comments mentioned, why does he react that way when he sees Jerry just kind of with her back
mm,
turned in the Waystar offices? And it's because he's a raw nerve at this moment, and the
yeah.
fact that that was a relationship that they hurt each other mutually towards the
Yeah.
end. You know, Jerry did not help him at the end of season 3, and he fired Jerry really callously in season 4 and kind of
Mm,
felt like she wasn't respecting him enough. So they were butting heads, but she was his only ally for a long time during the series.
yeah.
And kind of, and there was obviously like a sexual, perhaps romantic interest to her. And Roman is, you know, we never quite dive very deeply into his particular sexual hangups, but Jerry was probably the most functional sexual relationship he had, even though we've seen him with like several girlfriends who are more like
Absolutely.
friends than partners. And there is like, you know, and J. Smith Cameron tweeted that a picture of Roman at the end with a martini and says, "Oh, my ex wants me back."
Yeah.
And it's true. Like that is the closest thing that he's had to like an actual romantic relationship.
Hmm.
And like I think that set him off and it made him jittery and nervous and like looking at himself in the mirror and stuff.
Yeah.
And I think it has less to do with corporate power dynamics and more
Yes.
with emotional wounds.
Yeah.
And you know, and then the end when Roman kind of, you know, leaves everything. He signs away the company and he fucks off to a bar and he orders a martini. There's a little smile on his face.
I love
And
that
frankly,
smile.
I love that smile. It was very satisfying. And also, a lot of people on Twitter picked this up. A martini is Jerry's cocktail of choice.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
he's doing that thing. It's like even at the very last scene where we see Roman, he's thinking of Jerry. And
Yeah.
frankly, isn't that fucking cute?
So
I
cute.
love that.
And we get again, Kieran Culkin maybe has been the standout for me this season, I think. But like again, we get so many shades of the best and worst of Roman in this episode, right? He's such a strange, complicated person. We see that kind of victimized, masochistic Roman. We see the nasty, bullyish type of Roman. You know, we see the kind of mama's boy Roman. Again, like Kieran Culkin just absolutely nails it from beginning to end, doesn't he? And I love that, you
I
know,
love him.
arguably Roman maybe is the one that might be closest to some semblance of happiness at the end of this
Hmm.
episode, right? Definitely more than Kendall, and kind of undecided about Shiv, whether or not she has a happy ending or not, you know? So yeah.
I so agree. I honestly, they've all been exceptional. They've always been exceptional, but Kieran Culkin was doing something else this season. And
Yeah.
in the last couple of episodes in particular, in this one, there is so much going on in his face. It
Yeah.
is a astounding. And even that little final smile, and someone, and Asaf, thank you, points out that, for the first time in the whole series, Roman sits in a chair properly
Yes.
because he never sits right. But there is something about kind of closure. And I really wanted for this character to essentially like separate himself from his family, because that is, we, like I mentioned, we see Kendall's primal wound in this episode, about his dad's promise that will forever be unfulfilled now, and we see Romans as well. We see his kind of primal like missing piece. And I think there is kind of a satisfactory ending for him, because I don't think he thinks that he can ever kind of fully uh, fill that void, but
Yeah.
he can take himself outside of this race that simply does not give him anything.
Yeah.
And, it's interesting. Actually, I read an interview with Jesse Armstrong in Variety where he said that he thinks that Roman ends up exactly where he started. That he's still that guy, that he's like a playboy jerk with some quote, with some slightly nasty instincts and some quite funny jokes.
Right.
He could have stayed in that bar being that guy, and this has been a bit of a detour in his life, I would say. And these are his babies, but I kind of disagree. I kind of think that Roman is the one that has been so wrung out emotionally that he now has a chance to actually sit properly in a chair and kind of rebuild himself, because he never had that need that Kendall has to be CEO.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I think especially in season 4, or let's say from the end of season 3 to now, Roman has been on a massive journey and taken some massive turns. And I think there's that feeling of resignation to what they are at the end, right? These 3 ridiculous, not serious people. And I think Roman realizes it at the end, whereas Kendall never will realize it, right? There's that line he says, he talks about the company, so like it's bits of glue and broken shows, phony news, it's fucking nothing, we're bullshit, you're bullshit, I'm bullshit, it's fucking nothing, we're nothing. And I think it's that he definitely kind of can see more than his siblings can sometimes, in terms of how ridiculous they are as a unit, right? And maybe that's... And there's actually a line, isn't there, as well, where Kendall sort of says to him about crying at the funeral, he's like, you're not a business psycho like me, maybe you're actually more well adjusted than the rest of us, kind of thing. And it's like,
and there is an element as well of Roman about the previous episode where he's like, well, I cried at my dad's funeral, big whoop. And it is big whoop, but also it is kind of it is a terminal thing in the world that they inhabit. You can't be a person in this kind of high corporate, high stakes environment.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think like that, but I think all of those reasons mean that maybe now that he's out of it, he's going to find... I hope he's all right. I don't know why I hope he's all right, because again, he's not a nice person, but I sort of wish him the best.
Well, he's definitely nicer than Kendall, because you even remember, like, he pulls him away when he goes for Shiv and he yells like, he's fucking pregnant, you asshole. Like Kendall would have easily like thrown Shiv to the floor or out the window if it meant that he could become CEO. I have absolutely zero doubt about that. And I think Roman still has that, especially after the events of season 3. I think there was a dam that opened up in terms of the relationship between the Sibs, where Roman never closed that down again. He was always like, no, we like, if we need to activate the siblings, we will. Like, whatever corporate shindigs we're up to, be damned. We will always, do the jokes, give the support, be real people with each other, if not with the rest of the world.
Yeah, you're so right about that. So I wonder, should we talk about Shiv? This comment comes from Elsie, who says, I still feel there's something missing in explaining what made Shiv change her mind when it's time to vote. It feels like a very sudden change of heart. There's so much to talk about with that moment with Shiv, right? But what about Shiv generally through this episode? Because again, like, we've been talking about how incredible Sarah Snook's been throughout this season as well, right? And Shiv has had some brilliant moments, I think, in this season particularly. I found some of her arc in season 3 a bit frustrating because it was that constant kind of humiliation, right? And I feel like this season she's a little bit more on a kind of even keel with Kendall in terms of them two kind of going head to head, which I've quite enjoyed. But yeah, what did you think of Shiv and everything she goes through in this episode?
So there's two things. Shiv starts off really high and mighty, similar to Ken. As you mentioned at the start of our recording, it's very much Shiv versus Kendall. Shiv
Yeah.
is with Mattson. And I think the same kind of institutional, unavoidable misogyny that plagued her throughout season 3 rears its head again in this situation, in this
Yeah.
episode in particular. Precisely because at the very start of the episode, when she's still in Mattson's camp, we see this, she's basically telling him what to do, like how many votes they have. And we see this glimpse of a magazine article where there's a caricature of her pulling the strings of a Mattson-esque puppet.
Yeah.
And Mattson numerous times says, "Oh, I thought it was funny. I don't mind. Lol, lol, lol." He fucking minds. Of course he fucking minds.
Yeah.
And it's clear that this is this caricature might not be the moment, but it might be the cincher of him deciding, actually, I don't want her to be in the CEO spot. And he's already interviewing other people, and Shiv, once again, baby girl, why do you keep placing your trust in these people who are so obviously gonna fuck you over?
Yeah.
She is not, she's not, as ambitious and self-serving as she can be, she keeps failing to serve her own interests, which is deeply frustrating. But, she's basically given all this stuff to Mattson. She's proven and that she can advise him, that she can get him to where he needs to be. He's taken all that stuff from her and now decides to fuck her over. And that relationship is central at the beginning of the episode, and then it all becomes about Shiv and her brothers. But in that Mattson dynamic, Shiv basically signs her own exit from Mattson's new Waystar when she basically pitches Tom to him without realizing it. When she tells him, "Oh yeah, Tom is fine. He's sort of, he's okay, but he's an interchangeable part, and he will honestly just suck the biggest dick in the room." That's what Mattson thinks of himself. He thinks he's the biggest dick in the room, and Shiv also thinks that she's the biggest dick in the room, and Mattson's just not going to have that.
No.
It's not going to be like a dick measuring competition between the two of them for the rest of his reign. He's like, no, gonna get rid of her and put in a meat puppet or a pain sponge, as he refers to Tom later, to just take the blows and let me do the actual business. And it is so devastating and so dumb that it happens to her again. But in fairness to her, she recuperates really quickly as soon as she realizes that she's been backstabbed again, and very quickly shifts to supporting Ken, because that is the only way that they can get the company back. But her ambivalence is there from the start. So I wanted to ask you, because you used this word earlier, do you think Shiv pivoting several times throughout the episode from Mattson to Kendall and then from Kendall back to Mattson, do you see that as a betrayal?
I guess, yeah. I think I do in what she does to Kendall at the end. I think, that sort of is a betrayal, right? Because she sort of put her support in him and then changes at the very last minute. But also, I was kind of glad that it happened as well, for one thing, because I didn't actually want Ken to become the CEO. But I don't know what single thing, or maybe it's multiple things, that actually triggered that betrayal or that turn, I suppose. Because I don't think it's a betrayal in the way that I don't think she was pretending the whole time. I think when she gave him her blessing the night before and they had that lovely evening together, I think she was genuine, but I think something changed her mind the next day at that board meeting, right? And when she suddenly goes, I have to think, I have to leave. And then he comes and follows her into that room and is such a dick about it that it just makes her mind up even more. And she goes, no, and so I think, I guess I don't think it's a betrayal in that she was lying about it and plotting it the whole time, but a betrayal in the way that she had her brother's back until the very last minute and then decided she didn't, I suppose. But yeah.
So I think there's two moments that make her change her mind, or at least give her pause and doubt.
Mm.
And so I think the other thing we haven't mentioned, and we've talked a lot about costumes as we've discussed the season, the moment where they get off the PJ and they're all wearing black and they're color coordinated and they're all on their phones. It is like the corporate Charlie's Angels. I loved it. It was beautiful to behold.
Incredible.
So I think there's two moments. One, when they go into Logan's office and Ken sits at the desk and he does like a little dancey dance where he's like, "Oh, should I? Is it it's not a magic chair. Just sit down." And he says he instantly becomes like too cocky for comfort. He puts his feet up on the desk. He's like doing like all of this like business bullshit, and you can see Shiv just go, "Excuse you?"
Yeah.
And then the other big moment is when they get into the board meeting and Kieran Culkin has this like is a huge, physical performer. And there's this thing, when Roman is all peacocking, he moves very differently from when he is trying to make himself as physically small as possible, of, hiding. And and he does this thing that she picks up on where his wound is bleeding and opened up and he's dabbing at it constantly, and then he's also just small, he's not looking up, he's just saying, yeah, I vote for Ken. And Ken says this thing, which, by the way, his pitch to not vote for Matsson's deal is so bullshit, so lazy, has done no work. He just comes in, be like, yeah, you should vote for me because I'm Big Ken. I'm like, I'm L to the OG. I'm like, no, dude, if you're gonna attempt a coup, just do it better. Anyway, and she sees all that cockiness again, but then also she sees that something's happened with Roman, and I think she recognizes that new violent streak in Ken. Bear in mind that they also know the murder that happened, and so she's also, that comes back. And I think that's the moment where the doubt is firmly planted in her head. And also, Shiv has never actually been given the power of decision until this moment. Nothing has ever come down to her. And there's this moment in season 3 where she throws a Tanti B and she's like, when they're talking about electing the new president. And she's like, no, my opinion matters more. This is the one scene where her opinion actually matters the most because she's got the final vote. And it's like, it's overwhelming. And there's this, when she takes a beat and then they have that whole argument, that's the confirmation. He is a monster. He is like a violent person. He also doesn't see his violence as violence. It's like, oh no, I didn't do it. He will do whatever the fuck it takes. And it also feeds into her thing of, is she, and I've read several theories about this, and I'm kind of ambivalent about my own position on this because I see 3 things happening at the same time with this decision to pivot against Kendall. On the one hand, is she protecting the bigger picture? Is she protecting the world in America from having a violent, monstrous new CEO in place who's such a massive narcissist? Is she protecting her brother from having this thing that he has always wanted that will make him even more horrible, that will just propel him to the depth of, the darkest parts of his soul? Or a third option is she just taking revenge? Is she just taking away the sweetie from the big brother who pushed her aside and grabbed the crown with his other brother, but not the girl?
Or is there a fourth one, which is she doing it for Tom? Is she doing it to help Tom and therefore her own family's future too? Like, I wonder if that, again, like that, I'm not sure if I believe that that's the reason either, but there might be a bit of that too, right? That it's kind of more, there's more in it for her if her husband becomes the CEO, right? Rather than Kendall. So that's kind of interesting too. But I don't know, because Shiv is such a difficult one to read, I think, with those kinds of moments, particularly when it comes to Tom and how much she actually cares and wants to help Tom versus couldn't give a fuck, basically, and that kind of, like, we got in the comments at the very beginning of this chat, like that an ambiguous hand-holding moment the last time we see Shiv and Tom, right, in that car, and he offers his hand out to her and she sort of awkwardly places her hand in his hand, but it's not like a very nice, sweet moment. It's a very like, okay, we're doing this together now, and like, but they also can't really stand each other. Like, it kind of felt like that to me in that moment, you know. So yeah, it's a fascinating thing. How did you find that? How did you read that moment with Shiv and Tom at
Well,
the end?
the thing is that I think that, and Tom mentions this, I think Shiv is finally in love. I think she's finally in
Mm.
love with Tom, and I don't think she has been throughout the whole 4 seasons.
Yeah.
She's told him, "I was like, I love you, but I don't, not
Yeah.
really."
Yeah.
And here she calls him up, and she's like, has it maybe been worth it? Have we genuinely seen each other? And can we, would you be interested in a real relationship? The
Mm-hmm.
word real keeps coming back up over and over again. This is the defining kind of thing with the Roys.
Yeah.
Are you a real person? Is this a real relationship? Is this real? Is this actually happening?
Yeah.
And
Can we have
one
a
could,
real conversation as well? They say that a lot,
yeah,
don't they? Yeah.
and one could argue that Shiv and Tom have not had a real relationship
Mm.
until now,
Mm-hmm.
until all the horrible, horrible stuff that they throw at each other. And the other thing is that the power imbalance between Shiv and Tom has always been in her favor, but it's not anymore.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that is new. And that is
Yeah.
weird and kind of off putting and also kind of hot,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of, this is the one thing I think that we got right from our predictions. This is Shiv's worst possible timeline. This is Shiv
Mm.
becoming, on the one hand, doing what she's always done best, which is being the whisper in the ear of powerful men, of
Yeah.
actually enacting change through like men
Yeah.
puppets.
Being the smarter person behind the powerful man, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. She's always,
Yeah.
she's failed constantly when she's tried to put herself in the front
Mm.
line, but she's
Mm-hmm.
been pretty successful when she's been the advisor. Then on the other hand, she has become the wife.
Yeah.
She's now the wife of the CEO. She's not Shiv fucking Roy as she is in season 1. She is Tom Wamsgan's wife. And
Mm.
she's pregnant, and she's the only girl, she's the only woman, and she is, I'm using air quotes here, kind of reduced to the womanly roles of the wife, the mother. And
Mm-hmm.
she's essentially a version of Caroline as well. She is the woman pregnant woman who doesn't really want to have children, who is going to have children that she's probably going to emotionally neglect
Mm-hmm.
for their entire lives, and married to a corporate monster.
And also the corporate monster as well is interesting, right? Because actually it is almost a bit of a win for Shiv in that she will be the smarter, more powerful one behind the CEO, right? But then also Tom, this follows on from what we were saying last week about this idea that becoming the CEO is not really a win in this world,
No.
right? Tom is not really going to have a lot of power. He's going to be Lucas's like whipping boy, essentially, right? He's also going to have probably Shiv telling him what to do most of the time. Lucas basically all but said in that quite horrific conversation they have together where he talks about all that misogynistic stuff about how basically he's decided he doesn't want to promote Shiv because he wants to fuck her, and that would be weird. And then when he outright tells Tom, "Oh, I want to fuck Shiv. I think she might want to fuck me. We're clickety clickety," and all this stuff. Tom just kind of has to listen to it and grin and bear it, right? And now Tom potentially has this lifetime of being in this weird thruple essentially with Lucas and Shiv, right? And will it actually be Shiv making the smart decisions behind the scenes, but he's going to be the front man, but Lucas is going to be running the show? And it's not a good outcome. I don't think it's actually that good an outcome for Tom either, really,
No.
this whole situation.
No. But
Yeah.
this is my question to you, Mike.
Mm.
Do you think that Lucas actually wants to fuck Shiv, or do you think that was a power play to test whether Tom is enough of a puppet and a paint sponge for him to like maneuver in that CEO position?
Do you know what? It's because Alexander Skarsgård again has been incredible, right? And Lucas is a really hard character to read in that way. Like, is he a complete idiot? And does he just say things that come to his head and blurts things out and confesses stuff to people that you think, why are you telling people that? Or is everything he's doing thought through, and is it a ploy, or is it a play, or is it a way to manipulate somebody? And I can't quite make up my mind about that. I tend
No,
to
me
read
either.
him as just being a bit of a dope, and him
Mm,
saying that stuff to Tom, I think, was probably true. And but he's just so entitled and clueless that he doesn't care who he says and what he says and to who, I think that's how I read it, that he did genuinely want to fuck Shiv, and he didn't have
mm,
any issue or hesitation with telling her husband that as well,
mm.
like just because of the amount of power he has, basically. I don't know.
I I thought that in first watch, but on second watch, I think I'm more of the opinion that he doesn't actually want to sleep with Shiv. I think he was
Mm,
testing Tom to see if he could stomach and still want the job. Because, like, if Tom had been like, don't talk about my wife that way, then he would
mm,
have been like, oh, well, I guess I'll go to, Lawrence from Volter
yeah,
to run the company. But this is like the ultimate thing of, can I totally walk over this guy
yeah.
if I do this? Like, if I say this girl's thing about his pregnant wife, and he
Hmm.
takes it and he agrees with me and he laughs at my jokes, then he'll probably just bend over for whatever I need or ask of him.
Yeah. God, that moment as well when he says, if I could have anyone in the world, why don't I get the guy who put the baby inside her instead of the baby lady? It's like, fuck, absolutely. Lucas also absolute monster, right? An absolute monster. It's
I
so
mean,
horrible.
genuinely, genuinely. And also just how quickly he, and he's like, oh, I needed maybe her political connections. But
Mm,
then turns out that's easy. So he sponged everything he could possibly use from Shiv.
yeah,
And now is the time to throw her aside because, as he says, he has plenty of people with ideas, but he needs the CEO is a front man. It's
yeah.
paint sponge. It's not a person with actual power, it's mock power. But Tom, maybe this is a good moment to move on to Tom
Mm,
CEO
yeah,
is he is that. He never actually like he will bend to whatever the position requires of him. If it means a promotion, more money, more power, he lays out his whole approach to that pretty clearly in this season. He likes a
yeah.
nice life. He likes power. He likes money. He deeply cares about his career. I don't think he particularly cares about the job that he is doing, but it
Mm,
means more and he likes more. So, similarly,
yes.
like he doesn't share the AT in politics, but he couldn't give a shit. Like, because it's a nice, juicy role
Yeah,
that puts him in the epicenter
yeah,
of powerful conversations and powerful decision making. He doesn't particularly want to make the decision, but he will do whatever it takes for the people who are actually making the decision. We saw a perfect example of that on election night. He was there kind of running the show and be like, yeah, I don't care who wins.
yeah,
You guys make the call and I'll put everything in action.
yeah,
So in a way, he is the perfect CEO because he's getting everything he ever wanted. He's getting power without actual power,
yeah.
and he's getting all the status and the peacocking around and the firing all the skulls and abusing Greg. Not enough. Fuck Greg.
Mm.
Um, without actually having to build a company or be Logan Roy. He's just like, I'll just be there.
Well, it's funny, like Mike has just said in the comments, it's funny how we all said Greg, was failing upwards, forgetting that Tom has done the same. And it's true, like Tom is,
Not
we saw,
forgetting it. Tom
yeah,
taught Greg everything he knows.
right. But Tom is, he isn't very good at anything he does. He doesn't have any values. We've seen him try and hold conversations with people like Lucas, and he's not particularly good at it. He wasn't very good on election night. He was freaking out. He was doing coke. He didn't know what to do until he was given
Mm-hmm.
orders from above, right?
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that Tom is very good at is kind of sneaking around and knowing what to say to certain people and what to hold back. And he made the smart move of not even giving Greg all the information, right? Because Greg can't be trusted. So he didn't even tell Greg, oh, I've just been offered CEO, right? And then, of course, Greg goes running off to Kendall. So he's very good at that kind of stuff, at being sneaky, right? And getting what is best for him. But other than that, he knows nothing. It's amazing. Again, and it is exactly what
No.
we said when we were making these predictions about Greg. And you were talking about that with Greg, about how he's the ultimate example of that guy, that entitled
Mm-hmm.
white guy that just manages to keep climbing the ladder. That is actually exactly what Tom has done. And it's amazing. And it's ridiculous because he's such a ridiculous human being, and yet it's also kind of believable, right? It's amazing. Yeah.
Totally believable. But
Yeah.
also he is a better weasel than Greg is, which is also
Much
why
better.
another reason why I just hate Greg is because, like, you know what? You're even terrible at being a goddamn snake. You're
Yeah.
you're
Oh,
a
terrible.
failure of a snake.
Well, I love
Um,
the moment when Lucas called him Judas and the whole
yeah.
room laughed at him. I was like, good. Like everyone
He's so
knows exactly
obvious.
who he
Well,
is.
this is my
Yeah.
point as well. It's like, Tom, why are you talking about anything with Greg in the room? Don't tell him anything. The fact that it's taken up to the finale for Tom to realize that Greg was running off to Kendall to tell him
Mm.
any little morsel of information that he heard. Oh my God. And honestly, can we talk about the best scene in the whole episode, which is when Tom gets Greg into this room
Oh,
and just slaps him and they get into a physical fight?
so good. It's so good. In the bathroom, right? In the famous bathroom where Kendall has his little breakdowns and everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Such a good moment, isn't it? And I love it later as well when he says to Greg, "You're a fucking piece of shit." Like,
Yeah,
yes,
he's
yes.
a fucking piece of
Yeah.
shit. Call a
So
spade a
good.
spade. He's the worst piece of shit. You know why he's the worst? It's not because he's like more of a climber and a snake than Tom. It's because he's fucking terrible climber as well.
Mm.
How far has he climbed? He's the highest paid assistant in history.
Yeah.
That is all. Like, if you're gonna climb like Wamsgans, like become the CEO,
Mm.
marry the one of the Roy siblings. Like Tom would have probably married Roman. Like if that
Yeah.
was the only option out of the eligible Roy siblings that he could wed, he would have married Roman as well. Like
Absolutely. Yeah.
that's how much of a committed snake he is. And
Yeah.
he at least knows when to like keep information close to his chest and when not to, and when to react in certain ways and when not to. The fact that he waits until he's crowned CEO to be like, fuck girl, fuck
Oh yeah. So good.
Frank,
Frankie
like,
Carl.
don't
Yeah.
need those old people around me, is like, yeah, he probably could have kicked off at them at Logan's funeral, but he didn't because he knew he was
No.
not in a position of power at that moment.
Absolutely. He knows exactly how to treat people and when. And he keeps Greg around because he likes having somebody to kick around as well. I mean, he's basically
Yes.
also like a school bully that bullies people that he knows he can get away with bullying, essentially, right? It's like, yeah, Trishy has just said this in the comments, like, Tom's low self-esteem bullying Greg makes him
Mm,
feel better. It's true, right? Like that is, and I think he's really put Greg in his place, which is quite satisfying. Like I feel like Greg is now going to be in a much more of a kind of Greg position again. He's not going to be on the 200K salary. You know,
he's
Tom's
back
like,
to
look,
Gregging.
Lucas wanted to get rid of you, but I've got some capital. I kept you around. So he knows now that Greg owes him everything, basically, and he can treat Greg however the fuck he wants to. And that
The
amazing moment when he puts the sticker
Oh
on the
my
head,
God,
oh,
yes. Several people are
perfection. It was
mentioning this.
perfection.
It was so
Just that
beautiful.
moment of being like, I own you now, right?
Yeah,
It was just perfect. It was so, so good.
yeah.
Yeah.
I love it.
Uh,
Honestly, I wish the
um,
worst for Greg.
oh,
I hate him
absolutely.
so much.
Absolutely. Well, I'm glad that he didn't get a particularly happy ending, which was great, So that was well deserved. But yeah, the sticker on the head was genius and a great callback to we get a little short sequence with Connor, right? The great reallocation where they're all
With Connor and Willow.
divvying up.
Yeah. Although
Divvying
Connor
up
has
the
already
stuff.
taken Logan's medals, his antique war medals,
Love
pocketed
that.
those
Love
straight
that.
away. And
And
Willow
that
wants
that
everything gone so she can get in her cow print sofa.
amazing.
Excellent.
And there's that, it's a really fun scene, that whole scene. There's a lot going on in that scene. And obviously there's that moment as well when they talk about how they're going to go long distance. They've got the 2-week itch already in their marriage, right? And he might have to go to Slovenia if Mencken wins the election. She's going to stay and do some writing, right? But then of course we get that
Hmm.
little hint of like, oh, something's going on in court in Wisconsin. Maybe Mencken isn't going to win the election after all, right? And then like Shiv's like, yeah, so you might get to stick together after all, right?
Yeah,
Which is
Willis'
hilarious.
crestfallen face at that
Yeah.
comment is like, oh God, no. I thought I was just gonna get away with having this incredible apartment in New York City and writing my little, Sans follow-up.
Oh God, it's so good. And then what did you think of that moment when they watched the virtual dinner party with Logan as well?
I
And we
thought it was
get a bit of Brian
beautiful.
Cox. What a beautiful moment. Like
Yeah.
really emotional that moment, wasn't it? It was
I think
great.
it was you, Mike, who was kind of talking about, are they going to bring back Brian Cox for a little cameo or flashback or
Yeah.
something? And I thought this was a really beautiful way of bringing him back for a little moment. Also very Godfather-esque, like the
Yes.
ending of the first Godfather where we just see this sort of, you know, wait, is it the first one or the second one? I think it might be the second one, where
Mm.
we just see this flashback to this dinner where all
Oh
the
yeah.
children are kind of settling in and they're waiting for their father, and obviously the father never arrives because Marlon Brando decided last minute he wasn't going to show up
Mm.
for a little cameo, but it's that. And also, I don't know if you noticed, we get a really sweet couple of moments between Carrie and Logan where she's literally
Yes.
leaning on his arm and is so clearly besotted with him. Like, Logan had game, even in his
Right.
old age.
And it's a weird, that might be the nicest we've ever seen Logan, right? It's so funny, this kind of weird period that the siblings were not aware of and we were not aware of as an audience, because this was when they were during the rift, right? During the rift and their time away from their dad. And it's him with Connor and Kerry, and then a few of the old guard, and they're all actually having what seems to be a really nice time together, aren't they?
Mm,
And they're like singing songs and reciting limericks and all this kind of stuff. And yeah, it was a lovely little moment of humanity. And again, emphasizing this funny thing about Connor as the kind of goofy comedic one, but also the oldest sibling, and actually maybe the one that was personally closest to their dad out of all of them, right? I feel like you're getting that impression more and more this season, especially since he's died, that Connor is the one that's kind of trying to help deal with the funeral arrangements and the
mm,
apartment, and he was there for those kind of evenings with him and that kind of thing. And yeah, I just thought it was a really sweet, lovely little moment, especially when you see obviously our three sibs and their faces as they watch it as well, right? Like
mm.
it's very like raw moment as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very gentle. And actually, it just reminded me of something that Jesse Armstrong said at the event, at the pre-episode interview. He said there was something in the script that they cut out in one of the episodes where it's Connor remembering the best memory he had of his dad. And
Mm.
it turned out at the end that that memory was actually a dream. And it was just him and Logan and George Washington talking about America or politics or
Yeah.
something.
Okay.
And there was, I think, I don't think they were close at all, but I think Connor was the one who desperately tried to be closer
Mm.
through these sort of acts of service, of
Mm.
organizing the events or handling the
Yeah.
event organizers and,
Yeah.
handling the funeral and all this stuff. Because he never actually wanted that much from Logan except to be
Exactly.
liked.
Yeah.
And there's this devastating line a few episodes ago where he says, "Oh, he never, Connor doesn't even get to speak to the phone when Logan is dying."
Mm.
And he says this horrible thing where, it was something like he never
He never
he never
liked
liked
me or
me.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That was sad. That was really sad. And it was lovely to see that little moment with Kerry. And also, did you notice there's that brilliant, like really quick shot when they're divvying up all the stuff they're reallocating, and he makes a reference to the second tier bereavers in the other
Yes.
room, and you could just see like Kerry and a few other people in there in a separate room. So good. This episode had so many funny lines as well, in
It
amongst all this really
did.
tragic, volatile stuff. Just had so many zingers as well. It was
Oh
brilliant.
my God, yeah. Between the special cheese and the creamy margins, it was
Honestly,
unbelievable.
yeah, Harriet Walter was brilliant in this episode as well. I was glad we
Oh,
got
she's
more of
always.
her, because like I felt like there wasn't enough of her in the funeral, so she was great in this. And I love this running thing of how she never has food in the fridge and she's
Yes.
bad at cooking and stuff. This stuff is so funny. And them talking about like the wartime pickle in the
Yeah.
fridge and like the knobbies. Do you eat the ends of loaves of bread, Anna? Do you eat
Yeah.
the
They're the
nobbies?
best
Yeah.
bit.
I like the
The
nobbies as
best
well. Yeah.
bit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
honestly, Mike, I think this is a British thing. I did not know they were called nobbies. I was like, what?
No,
And also,
no,
what
no.
unhinged behavior is it to just freeze the nobbies? For what?
That's so good.
Also, I'm sorry, but like, no disrespect to, like Wonder Bread or whatever it's called, but like you have all the fucking money in the world and you're buying like that bread?
Yeah, I know. It's
Like,
amazing.
I'm a bit of a bread snob. So,
Oh yeah,
so I'm
absolutely.
like, Harry or Walter, or Lady Caroline.
Yeah.
Seriously,
Uh,
seriously, you're gonna buy that bread and keep it frozen? Yeah, because you want to preserve all the beautiful taste it has.
it's just all the descriptions of her food, and she describes the portions as like hearty but modest, right? And then there's something later when they say something like, "Oh, the fish is going to go all globby or something as well," and it's like,
Oh,
it's
also
so
her thing
gross.
about like the face eggs, about her
Oh,
hating eyes
I
and not
hate
being able to
eyes.
take not being able to take care of Roman's injuries because of that.
Yeah, because of the face eggs.
Oh my
Amazing.
God,
So,
that's
so good.
very her. I
Yeah.
completely see that for her.
Oh God.
My
Well, there you go.
God.
I mean, who else? Is there anyone else we really need to discuss? Because
Well, we've
it's
discussed Matson. He's a
mm.
piece of shit. We've discussed Connor. Discussed Greg. Rotten hell. I hope we get run over by a fucking bus.
Were you
Discussed
were you
Tom.
what did you think of how little Jerry got to do in this finale? Like we barely saw
Well, it
her, did
makes
we?
sense.
Yeah.
It does make sense, doesn't it?
Mm.
She's got her thing. Well, Jerry's back. So one thing we should talk
Mm.
about is Tom's immediate new court, right? But he's
Yes.
instant like Carl dead, Frank dead,
Yeah.
Hugo fuck off. Where's Carolina?
Yeah.
Jerry back in. She's not afraid of the darkness. We know this to be true. So
Mm.
like Jerry, she's like the most beautiful cockroach in the world.
Yeah.
She will survive anything. She will like make sure her interests are served. She's probably already made a killing from Waster. She's gonna make even more money.
Mm.
Good for Jerry. I'm
Absolutely good for
so happy
Jerry.
for her.
And again, like this is where Tom is savvy because absolutely, if I was in Tom's shoes, I'd want to have Jerry by my side,
Mhm.
right? You absolutely want Jerry on your team. I think it's hilarious how much all of them seem to hate Frank and Carl. Like they just despise them, don't they? Like the Roy siblings hate them. Tom hates them. It's so funny. But they even have a little line at the end, don't they, where they're like, golden parachute or one last rodeo kind of thing. Like they're almost tempted to stay in the game as well,
They're
aren't
ready
they?
for the spin-off.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
also, we didn't even mention the Swedes. We didn't mention Oscar and Ebba,
Ebba.
who is like Lucas.
Yeah, I can't stop saying it like that. So
I
good.
know we do. But yeah, and obviously Greg spies on them with the little like translator from Swedish.
Yeah.
And also there is this, we haven't actually discussed this a lot, but there is throughout this season in particular, there is the American versus European thing going
Yes.
on. And
Mm.
there's nothing more arrogant than someone, like in this case, the Swedes, being like, we're just going to talk about really sensitive information about how we're conspiring against you, but we're going to talk about it in a language that you don't know because you're dumb Americans and you only know English. And we're
Yeah.
going to assume that technology doesn't exist that can translate it for you.
Yes.
I love
So
everyone is so arrogant.
yeah, the absolute arrogance of those guys. God, I wouldn't want to be working for Oscar in Waystar Royco either.
Oh,
Like that.
Oscar's a psychopath.
He's terrifying as well. And Ebba should get the hell out of there, I think, as well. Go do something. Go work for some better people, Ebba.
I think Ebba should align with Jerry, and Jerry's gonna
Mm.
tell her exactly how she should sue Lucas because
Mhm.
she's got literal pints and pints of his blood, same as Jerry has probably an entire hard drive full of pictures of Roman's dick.
Yeah, exactly. This is stuff that you need to keep. Absolutely keep this stuff as ammunition. Louisa says, I still believe Ebba played the Roys, which is
Very
interesting.
possible. I also
Yeah.
thought that's very possible. Yeah, that she was pretending to be kind of all vulnerable and upset at that party to
Mm,
give them enough information to give them a false sense of security and intel when
hmm.
actually she's just always on Gojo's side.
We should let me just hear your thoughts on some of these other characters people are mentioning in the comments that we haven't mentioned yet. Carolina, what do you think of Carol? She gets like a few
Smart.
key lines in this episode, doesn't she? Yes.
Carolina wants to end Hugo. I support her. He's a slime ball. Hugo's definitely going to go
Absolutely.
to prison for insider training.
Yes.
And Carolina very quickly goes up to Shiv like, oh, we should eliminate the toxicity in this organization. Let's start by taking Hugo out.
Well,
Wink,
Hugo put
wink.
all of his eggs into the Kendall basket, so he's fucked now, isn't he?
Well,
Completely
Hugo
fucked.
went up to Tom as soon as he walked into the room as CEO, being like, I was, the losers never win. I'm so happy for you. Hugo, sir,
Such
sir.
a slime ball. Such a slime ball. Fisher Stevens got a lot of airtime this season as well,
He
actually, didn't
did.
he?
Perhaps,
Yeah.
arguably a bit too much, but,
Yeah. I would have said I missed Carolina a little bit this season, actually,
yeah.
I've got to say. But what about Colin as well? Trishy's just mentioned Colin because he's now Sad Kendall's like bodyguard, isn't he? That's the thing.
Yeah. But what do you think about Colin? Because Colin's situation is like quite a fucked up one, isn't it?
It's quite a unique one, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
he had so much personal access to everything in Logan's life. So he has arguably maybe more information than anyone else in this whole cast, probably, right? Like he knows about the manslaughter and he knows about everything else. And yeah, he's now presumably maybe Kendall is just going to keep him on, but what is there going to be for Colin to do? He's just going to follow poor sad Kendall around.
He's basically on suicide watch for the rest of
Yeah.
Kendall's life, but also Colin is the only one that knows, well, aside from the other Sibs, about the manslaughter.
Yeah.
So he's just going around with this huge secret and protecting the guy who he kind of, thinks is an asshole.
Yeah.
And who is an asshole.
Yeah. Yeah. Whereas actually you
Yeah.
get the feeling, don't you, that he genuinely liked Logan, I think, Colin.
Yes. They were
which is
best
interesting.
pals.
They were best pals. I know. Now, of course, everyone's mentioning in the comments Mondale. Mondale,
Yes.
Anna. Justice for Mondale. We never really got a conclusion or any kind of resolution to the what has happened to Mondale. Is Mondale okay?
Thanks, Sean, for bringing up Mondale, because where is he? We have not seen him. He's not taken care of. If Mondale has been hurt, I think Greg should be blamed. I think Greg should be put in jail for animal cruelty. I will find a way to pin the death of Mondale the dog on Greg.
Great.
Where is he? Honestly, Tom and Shiv should not they should not own animals. They should not have kids because they do not know how to take care of anyone, barely themselves.
Tommy has said, what about Jonathan? What was his pitch? What were Jonathan and Peter Munyon pitching? It was only something about creamy margins. That was all I got. Creamy margins.
Do you think it was the horrible jail like, retirement homes?
Yes. The Living Plus type things.
Yeah. Oh God. Do you think maybe it
Jesus.
was a cheese factory?
Maybe it was. Maybe it was cheese. Yeah.
Either way, I wish Jonathan the best recovery from the siblings' rudeness.
So funny. I love that when they left and he was like, well, that was a waste of time. Again, so selfish. Like Caroline basically just wanted them there for selfish reasons, not actually anything to do with having a nice time with the family or helping Roman or anything. It's so funny. Yeah.
No, obviously not. Like, she could have at least bought something to eat if she wanted them there to have a nice time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there we go. I mean, I guess maybe we should talk about how did you find the end? Like these final moments of Succession. We get a glimpse of. I suppose we've already talked about a bit of it. We get a glimpse of Roman at the bar with his kind of slightly enigmatic smile. We get Shiv and Tom in their awkward handhold, and then we get sad Ken, don't we? Looking out onto some water as always with Kendall.
Well, there's the whole thing about Kendall and water, and there's a brilliant article in Vulture, I think, about the symbolism and of his relationship with water. I definitely encourage everyone to read. But there is we only briefly touched upon the hand thing.
Yeah.
And I mentioned it at the start, I think it's really beautiful and really conclusive that we end the series at the end of the Succession. Roman signs away the company. He takes the obligatory picture. He can barely contain his hatred of having to be in the same room as Matsson, even for a millisecond. And then it's done. We just get this one shot of each of them. Kendall staring off into the distance. Roman having a martini and having a smile to himself. And Shiv doing the thing that Tom instructed her to do, to meet him in the car in 20 minutes, and his
Mm-hmm.
open hand, kind of offering her that real relationship that she had asked for earlier in the episode. But
Mm-hmm.
at this point, she's she accepts it, but she doesn't accept it. You know, I don't
Mm-hmm.
think she's in a position to accept it or to deny it, because now, as I mentioned before, kind of the power dynamic has shifted. So now they're there. They have assumed that they are stuck with one another
Mm-hmm.
in this new position.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not, again, I didn't get the feeling that these two are going to live happily ever after, to be honest. Let's face it. Like, it didn't feel like a moment of reconciliation to me, to be honest. It didn't really feel like
Mm,
anything beyond, yeah, it's probably easier for us if we just stick together now, even
mm,
though we're not really sure we actually like each other in any way. Like, that's sort of how it feels to me. Although you're right, maybe Shiv is actually maybe falling for Tom more than she ever has done. But I don't know if
mm.
Tom feels that way anymore, does he? It's weird because, and now Tom has the power. He doesn't sort of need her anymore as well. That's the other thing.
No.
Yeah.
Although I guess, like I said before, she's now the voice in his ear.
Yeah.
So he'll mind her advice, but she's
Mm-hmm.
no longer the powerful one in that equation.
Mm-hmm. Where do you see these Sibs being in your future headcanon?
Oh
Do you think
God.
would they ever reconcile their differences after that bust up in that boardroom?
Do you know what?
Will Shiv and Kendall be friends again? Do you think?
We might need to do like a whole separate bonus episode about the alternative timeline of
Yeah.
Shiv, Kendall, and Roman, because I have thoughts, but
Mm.
there is, I do genuinely think that after the events of the season, their bond with each other is very true and very strong. And
Yes.
now that they have gotten rid of this massive beast of Waystar, it's in a way, selling Waystar is actually putting to bed, actually burying their dad,
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
so than the funeral.
Yeah.
Because the big company that he built, that is him, that is
Mm.
so aligned and intertwined with who he was and everything he
Mm-hmm.
did, both great and terrible. Now it's finally gone. It's out of their hands. They don't have to deal with it anymore. They are finally free. Well, Shiv is kind of not, because she's still
Mm.
tied to Waystar by marriage,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't have a say anymore. They don't have any stakes in the company anymore. And that is liberating, but in a really scary way.
And presumably they're all a few $1 billion up now
Oh
as
yeah, well
well.
that's that. That's
Are they
that. They're
gonna
also
buy?
extremely
Are they gonna
rich.
buy Pierce together? Probably not,
I
right?
don't think
I'm
so.
assuming
No.
that's not gonna happen.
No.
But
I really
what I
hope.
imagine
Yeah.
what I imagine it would be is that Roman would somehow be the one to bring the three of them together again at some point. You know what I mean? I feel like it would be down to him, probably not Kendall or Shiv, in making that first move in reconciling their differences.
I agree. And also, frankly, I hope that Roman invests at least 500 million of that money into therapy. Therapy every day for baby girl Roman,
Yeah.
just constantly.
Yes. Very much so. I think that's needed. They could all do with some therapy, to be honest.
Oh
Let's
yeah,
be honest.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But
Yeah,
Roman seems to be the one who is like most open potentially to getting therapy.
definitely. Definitely. So there you go. I mean, we usually finish these podcast episodes as well with talking about kind of winners, MVPs. Is there an MVP of this episode? Is there
I
an MVP of the
mean,
whole show? I don't know. What do we think? I guess it's Tom
Tom
Wamscams.
Wamsgans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who saw that coming, right?
Oh, the only other one is also, we haven't mentioned him, is Stewpot.
Stu
Stewie.
Potts. Yeah.
Yeah.
Who is also a bit slimy and he loves to change sides every 2 minutes as well, doesn't he?
Yeah, but we always knew that. It was
Yeah.
telegraphed. Also, oh my God, Michael. Sorry, I called you by your full name. I
I
never do
love it.
that. When he came into the room at the board meeting, the audience in the entire auditorium just went, whoa.
Wow.
Yeah, the thirst for Stewie is very real, and he was
Wow.
looking very good. So
I love
everybody
that.
was like, ooh, there was like a shift in everybody's seats where they was like, oh, he's wearing the polo shirt like buttoned up to the very top. Okay, Stu. And also, he likes kissing men on Molly. So
Yeah.
good for bisexual King Stewie.
Yeah, love him. Love him. Yeah, it's great. Great to see Sandy and Sandy as well. Love them. Yeah, we got a bit of everyone in this episode, didn't we? It was great. But yeah,
Yes.
Stewie's done well out of all of this, as always. Although he did actually, because he was going to get a chair under Kendall, wasn't he? But now he's not, presumably. But he's still probably making all
Yeah.
the money in the world, so it's fine.
He ended in a good note with Tom. He's like, congratulations, let's chat. And Tom was like, yeah, let's do that. So I think they're going to do some business together.
The question of who is the saddest at the end of this episode, again, probably quite an obvious one. The
Mondale.
saddest, Mondale. Sad, possibly a contender for the saddest television character that has ever existed, Kendall Roy, I think, right?
Yeah.
Truly.
Do you know what I'm actually genuinely really happy for?
Mm.
I'm so happy for Jeremy Strong. He is
Oh, yeah.
free.
He's free.
He's free of Kendall Roy.
Here's a question, and I don't know whether anyone's written about this yet or not, but do we think that smoothie was real, and did Jeremy Strong really drink it? The meal fit
think he
for a
did.
king that had
Yeah.
Sarah Snook's spit in it, and it had eggs and eggshells and Tabasco and all that other stuff.
Listen, Mike, who wouldn't drink Sarah Snook's spit?
I mean, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, for real. Yeah.
Absolutely.
But no, I think I read an article that, because he's all method and stuff, it was real, that
I was going to
he did
say,
drink it. Yeah.
I bet he did. I was thinking as I was watching that scene, I was like, I bet Jeremy Strong insisted that he drinks whatever is in that thing. So good.
There's also a video circulating online of both Kieran Culkin and Sarah Snook kind of taking turns at shaving his head. I think on the last day of shooting, he, I guess like has a symbolic shedding of Kendall. And he kind of they shave his head.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Oh, everyone's saying in the comments he definitely did drink it. Yeah, we knew it. There you go. That's amazing. Joe Budd says, did you notice Jerry Horn from Twin Peaks at the board meeting? I did not notice Jerry from Twin Peaks.
I did not notice that.
Gonna have to rewatch that. Love it.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. And then again, we've mentioned so many, Anna, but favorite quotes, favorite lines, anything that we haven't mentioned yet?
I think my favorite, it's from the scene in the kitchen with the siblings when they're all cackling and laughing, and Kendall says to Roman, "Don't go down on Peter's special cheese."
So good. So good. That whole cheese sequence was just phenomenal.
It's so funny. It's so just effortlessly funny and so low stakes. It was just a real respite in a very, very intense episode.
It almost felt, that kitchen scene almost felt like they were just kind of improvising as well, like that.
Yes.
They almost just let the actors run with it, like it was, so good. I liked Shiv at the beginning saying Rome might not even show up from whatever jerk dungeon he's being pity spanked in. That was good. That was good.
That was good. And also when a highlight was when Tom was like, to Shiv, you've fallen in love finally. You've fallen in love with our scheduling opportunities.
That is good. Oh, Tom. I mean, again, like, it's so hard. It's going to be so hard to predict which of these cast members is going to win awards, right? Because all of them deserve them.
All of them.
And like we've talked about Kieran Culkin and how good those three sibs are, but also Matthew McFadden from beginning to end in this show has just been like exquisite as well, hasn't he? So good.
I mean, I guess the difficulty will be because of, I think Sarah Snook is definitely going to win, but also she's the kind of the only female lead in the show. So it's kind of just all on her. But with the rest of them, like between Jeremy Strong and Kieran Culkin and Matthew McFadden and even Alexander Skarsgård, they're kind of competing against each other. So maybe we'll see some Emmy nominations or Golden Globes nominations where either they do a little bit of, separating them, divvying them up between categories, or it's just going to be like everyone from Succession is nominated.
Yes. I think it could go either way, couldn't it? I imagine they would put, maybe even Brian Cox, right, could get a supporting nom for this season. Definitely Matthew McFadden. It's whether or not they would put Jeremy Strong and Kieran Culkin in a lead actor category together, I wonder.
Oh, I hope I hope they find a way to do that so they can both win.
Yeah, they need to both win, right? This
Yeah.
is otherwise they'll end up fighting each other in a backstage room. This is what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, other than that, I think we've mentioned all of the other just incredible lines, like hilarious lines, but also devastating lines,
Hmm.
powerful lines. That whole Kendall breakdown, just every line of that whole sequence is just incredible. I think,
I
I'm the
know.
oldest son, and all of
And
that
she was like,
stuff
but no,
is
you're not.
no,
You're literally not.
so good.
Yeah. It is going to be, I don't think it's fully settled for me that this is the last episode ever, that we're not going to
Mm.
get more Succession.
I know. And I was going to ask this question, but I almost feel like we need to let it sit with us for a bit longer before I ask this. But like, do you see this episode in the canon of great TV endings? Like, is this going to be there alongside the end of The Sopranos, The Wire, 6 Feet Under, those sorts of phenomenal TV endings?
Absolutely. I
Mm,
really
hmm.
do. And
Yeah.
you know what? I was listening to another podcast and they made this point that the thing that makes Succession kind of special amongst kind of, the pantheon of great prestige television,
Mm,
no one's disputing the quality of The Sopranos, of Mad Men, of Breaking Bad, The Wire, all these great shows.
mm,
Succession is so rewatchable.
mm,
I've watched all those shows
hmm.
once.
Yeah.
I appreciate them. I've watched Succession maybe 4 times over. And
Yeah.
I could start rewatching it tomorrow and enjoy it and find
Yeah.
new stuff. It's probably one of the rare prestige TV shows that is unbelievably rewatchable. And I
Mm.
think that kind of lends it a particular special place in that pantheon, but also in audiences. Sounds a bit corny, but it kind of in audiences' minds and in their hearts, where it's like you
Yeah.
get really used to and appreciative of the show, all the jokes in the background, all the supporting characters, all the kind of
Yeah.
pop in, tertiary characters that come in, because you just watch it so often that
Hmm.
you're more at home with it.
Totally. Yeah, I completely agree with you. It is so rewatchable. Even doing this for this podcast and watching basically every episode about 3 times
Hmm.
every week
Hmm.
before we podcast about it is not a chore, right? Because you're right,
No,
it is so, and also because it's so dense. Every episode is so dense that every time I watch it, there will be something new to notice or to
hmm,
figure out, or you read a line of dialogue slightly differently each time you hear it as well, And yeah, it is what an incredible. I mean, the writing is just out of this world, really, isn't it? It's
just
so good.
spectacular.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm really gonna miss it. I'm really gonna miss Succession, and I'm really gonna miss doing this show. This has been such a highlight
Oh,
of watching it, and then knowing that we're gonna like have our discussion and have our little inside jokes as well.
yes.
It's been a real
Oh,
joy, dude.
it's been the best, hasn't it? I'm so glad that, like, about a year ago, you text me being like, we're gonna do this. We're gonna call it the Successionistas, and I was like, yes. And I was so glad that we managed to make it happen. It's been amazing, and like it has. It's been like very therapeutic being able to talk in depth about all of these fucked up characters week on week with you. It's been amazing. Yeah.
Totally,
Um.
totally.
And yeah, and I guess
So
that's
I
sort
guess
of it,
that's
is it
it.
for now?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
thank you to everyone watching along. We had like 100 of you watching, which is lovely, and commenting
Yeah.
along. This has been so much fun.
Well, I think we have like almost 300 people watching now.
There you go. There you go. I love it. Well, a big, huge thank you to everyone
Thank you to all of you.
for listening. Yeah, and if you just happen to be tuning into this live stream and you haven't listened to the rest of the podcast, there's like 10 episodes of me and Anna talking about even the first 3 seasons we covered, didn't we?
Yes. We
One
recapped the
season at a
three
time.
seasons.
Yeah. So there you
Yeah.
go. Come and check out more of the Successionistas. Yeah. Um, well, there we go. I'll do the
That's
little.
it.
I'll do the wrap up, Anna. Just so that I can
Well,
see you shout the Successionistas one more time.
I was gonna say if you wanted to do it the other way around, so you get to shout it.
No, it has to be you. It has to be you. You're the best at it. Anna, that's it. I'm sure it won't be long before me and you are doing some other podcast together about a movie or a franchise or something horror related or something TV related. So I'm sure we'll be back. But until then, let people know where they can find you and more of your stuff online.
So you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Anna B. Demented. You can also pre-order my book, Unlikable Female Characters, The Women Pop Culture Wants You to Hate, which has a ton of Siobhan Roy in there and
Mm.
other fictional women that are detestable and compelling in equal parts. You can also listen to my horror film history podcast, The Final Girls, and a whole bunch of other horror podcasts that Mike and I have done together. And I think that's me. And where can people find more of your work online, Mike?
Yeah, you can find me, all the stuff that me and Anna do together. You can find if you just follow us on the socials. I'm on Twitter at the Movie Mike, and you can also follow my podcast, The Evolution of Horror, wherever you get your podcasts. And that's it for this week. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much for listening to this entire series of The Successionistas.
The Successionistas!
Beautiful. Beautiful.
I think I screamed that a little bit too loudly, but
it was great.
Whatever.
It was great. One day we'll make, like you suggested this, didn't you? Just like a little montage of each time we did this every week. It's great. It's great. Amazing.
Thank you so much for everyone for tuning in. Have a great night.
Yeah, have a wonderful rest of the night. And thank you again. Cheers, guys. I will hit stop. End stream. There we go. I think we're offline. There we go.